Chapter 251. AN. The whole chapter used Florentia's pove for so yeah, happy reading. Tia! Lorraine hugged me and laughed. The pulling force and voice were incomparably bright and powerful. Hello, Lorraine, I also said while hugging Lorraine. Then I looked at Avenox standing behind Lorraine. Welcome, Sir Avenox. Thank you for the welcome, Lord Lombardi. Avenox's face still seemed to be shining brightly, and his smile was full of joy on his face. It's been a while, everyone. Lorraine, who hugged me, soon greeted the twins and said, You seem to be much healthier than before. Good for you. The twins also welcomed Lorraine. It wasn't just me and the twins who came to meet her in front of the mansion. Welcome, Lorraine. How are you? The employees who have worked in the mansion for a long time also came out to see Lorraine while taking a break during their busy days. I missed you all. Lorraine cried as she looked at their faces affectionately one by one. It was a completely different sight from when she sneaked out of this mansion in the middle of the night. Everyone was gathered together to welcome Lorraine, and finally Lorraine stood before my grandfather. It must be a lot of trouble coming all the way here, Lorraine. Wait. Grandfather said that in a friendly voice. Sir Avenox, could you bring it to me from the carriage? If that's it. Ah, Avenox clapped his hands lightly and hurried to the carriage. It was a bouquet of flowers that squeezed in between the employees who were busy unloading their luggage. Avenox, of burly build, was big enough to frown slightly. Oh my goodness, flowers in this winter? Oh my god, there are hundreds. People opened their eyes wide in surprise. The bouquet was fresh enough to make me forget that it's winter now. I brought it because I wanted to give it to my grandfather and the people of Lombardy as a gift. Lorraine said with a shy smile. Lilies, is this really? Grandfather asked, looking at the bouquet with a puzzled face. Yes, that is correct. But how did you save so many lilies in this winter? Because the eastern part doesn't get very cold when in the middle of winter. And I built a greenhouse and raised it. It was growing very well. When Lorraine spoke lightly as if it were nothing, Avenox quickly added from the side. Originally, lily was not a flower in the east. Lorraine is working on improving plants that do not originally grow in the east, like lilies, to fit the eastern soil, grandfather. Oh, is that right? Yes, not long ago I started studying wheat that didn't grow well in the east, and it works very well. You're doing a very good job, Lorraine. Lorraine's face blushed at the praise of my grandfather. We will take the bouquet, Don said as he brought two great employees. Ah, then, thank you very much. As Avenox, who smiled, handed over a bunch of lilies, the two employees were seen staggering for a moment. You must be tired of coming from far away. So let's go inside and get warm, grandfather said, letting Lorraine first into the mansion. And you, yes, grandfather. Avenox, who was naturally trying to follow, Lorraine, with a smile on his face, froze at my grandfather's call. Maybe he just realized his situation. The reason, anyway, Avenox is the man who took Lorraine to the east by escaping in the middle of the night. He wasn't in a position to stand tall in front of my grandfather. Even in my eyes, taking a step back and watching, I can see the cold sweat that is flowing on Avenox's back by now. Oh, Grandpa looked at Avenox for a moment without saying a word. Gulp. I could see Avenox's Adam apple move greatly with tension. Let's go in, grandfather said so, giving Avenox a tap on the shoulder, turned his back first and walked inside. That was all. However, Avenox's face instantly brightened as if it had been lit like a fire. Oh, thank you. Avenox's loud voice rang out loudly as he quickly followed my grandfather. I looked at the bouquet of flowers that the employee was struggling to hold. Lilies, is this also a coincidence? It is the flower that goes best with Lorraine. As I looked into the lily flower, I remembered the memory of my previous life, the white lily that filled Lorraine's funeral home. Eastern climate must be right when you see a big, fresh bloom of lilies like this. I turned and said to John, it would be nice to decorate the Lombardi mansion with this, even the banquet tonight. Yes, my lord. Butler John said with a smile. Ah, it's cold. Come on, everybody, get in there. Don't catch a cold. I said that to everyone and shivered my shoulders a little and went into the warm mansion. Winter is still cold. Everyone in Lombardy gathered to welcome Lorraine back. Not only my father, but Shannonette and even the people of the Vassal family. Everyone gathered in one place, and a noisy banquet was held. Nominally, it was a party to welcome Lorraine back, but a little look inside the banquet hall showed that it wasn't. Lombardy, however, does not hold a general banquet this grand. Instead, it was prepared as an engagement party. This banquet was prepared by my grandfather for Lorraine. Therefore, it contained my grandfather's heart to take care of his granddaughter's engagement banquet even now. That exclamation mark. That's why Lorraine began to shed tears as soon as she entered the banquet hall. But it wasn't a sad tear. Congratulations, Lorraine. Congratulations. A huge banquet hall full of people celebrating the engagement of Lorraine and Avenox. The banquet began. Lorraine and Avenox began to dance together. With a picturesque pair, I muted unconsciously, but everyone around me nodded. That's how much Lorraine and Avenox fit together. Avenox, which is bright like a sun, and Lorraine, who bloomed fresher with its light. As you can see, it was a pair that can put a smile on anyone. Florentia, my grandmother approached me while watching the dance. After my inauguration banquet, my grandmother and her tribal people who have been staying in the mansion have been sightseeing in earnest for the past few days. At first, grandmother's Dr. Onta also complained about the cold weather, as well as learning and experiencing new things every day. What a nice man and woman they are, grandmother said as she looked at Lorraine and Abenox, who are now spinning around. There are some flowers that grow better in other places than where they were originally born and rooted. Yes, Lorraine will live happily in the East. I don't have the foresight like my grandmother and mother, but I knew instinctively that the future would be full of happiness in front of Lorraine. When Shan left the village, she took a bunch of flowers in a pot and took them away. She said that she will make the flower take root wherever she will be. My mother took a flower. What kind of flower was that? Oh yeah, it was a Bomnia flower tree. What did you just say? Bomnia? Bomnia is a flower that blooms in the fields in spring where we live. It's a red wildflower that's only native to the south. I read it in Paris' letter. It is said that Bomnia is a flower that grows only in the south, and it was also the herb that played the most important role in curing my father's incurable disease. What in the world? I wanted to ask, if you were in front of me now, mother, how far in the future did you see? My grandmother said to me, who was so surprised that my mind got tangled up and handed over a wine. I have a favor to ask of you, Florentia. Yes, please tell me. Leaving my blackened mind aside for a moment, I replied in as calm a voice as possible. If I send some of the people from the tribe to Lombardy in the future, can you take good care of them? The people of the tribe? People in my mother's hometown said they had a very closed culture. So did my grandmother and two people I've met in the past few days. Most of the time, I didn't talk to the tribe, and sometimes they talk in a tribal language that I didn't know. As if reading my expression like that, my grandmother said, wouldn't it be impossible for us to hide in the jungle forever? When the time comes, you have to break the egg and come out. Grandmother's gaze, who said so, looked at the colorful lights of the banquet hall, but she seemed to look somewhere further away. So be it. To me, the people of the tribe are like relatives. Grandmother smiled at my words. Florentia, hold on. Grandmother, who grabbed my arm, came a step closer. Then she whispered in a very small voice, so that no one could hear what she's going to say. Sooner or later, someone around you will die. My grandmother's cloudy eyes were looking straight at me, but it didn't scare me or give me goosebumps. Rather, I felt my worries intact, and I felt my surprised heart calm down for a momentarily. I wasn't scared by the warning of death. Words can't describe it properly, but I had a hunch instinctively that it wouldn't be such a bad thing for me. Yes, you are Shan's child. Even though I couldn't see it well, my grandmother, who was looking at my face directly, was smiling. She patted my hand and said, it's a good thing that you weren't born full into the tribe. I was almost born with an overwhelming ability like Shan. I'm glad you're out of the loop. Grandma said so and held my hand tight for a long time. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. On the day of the signing ceremony for the appointment of the crown prince, I left the Lombardy mansion early in the morning. Just in case, my carriage was escorted by the Lombardy knights, including the twins. Without stopping once, thanks to a carriage that ran to the imperial palace as if it were sailing in a fair wind, I was able to arrive at the conference hall where the signing ceremony was held long before the scheduled time was left. However, the large conference hall was already crowded with people, and there were a total of 5 chairs on the large round table in the middle. As I stepped on the soft carpet, the people standing around the round table greeted me. You're here, Lord Lombardy. Luman of the East, Brown of the West, Ivan of the North, and Soshu of the South. The local householders to sign the Crown Prince's appointment finally gathered together. Tia's mom is so cool. Note, the flower was actually called by two names in the translation, Bomnia and Springia. But I'm sure you know what that flower is. End of chapter 251. Chapter 252. Florentia's Pov. The conference room was no different from the usual conference sessions. Central aristocrats were invited to sit on both sides in the name of witnesses, and their conversations were raucous. The difference is that a round table for the 5 householders was placed in the center, where Brown's witness stand was once placed, and a high platform was installed in the place where the emperor usually sat. And on top of the podium lay the crown for the prince decorated with gold. Long time no see, Lord Lombardy. As I looked at the crown prince crown with a strange heart, Megante Ivan approached and greeted me gladly. It's been a while. I also greeted the others happily and mingled among the 4 representatives. I heard you're building a Lombardy hospital. Oh my. From the side, a big man, Patriarch Soshu, approached and suddenly talked. Seeing the other householders were also looking at me with their eyes twinkling, everyone seemed to have heard rumors about the massive construction project that had now opened and begun. Of course, that's exactly what I intended. Well, I guess the rumor has already spread. That's all the stories of the aristocrats of the ecliptic Lombardy's new owner is making an extraordinary move. If Megante Ivan, who arrived in the ecliptic the day before yesterday, said so, the desired purpose of spreading rumors quickly about the hospital seemed to have been achieved. I replied with a nod. That's right. The hospital is what exactly is it? asked the Patriarch of Soshu. It's kind of a big legislator. The hospital, where any citizen of Lombardy can come and receive treatment, was scheduled to treat all imperial citizens like the academy, but it was deliberately reduced. Anyone? But that alone, Avinox, who had come as deputy patriarch of Lumen, asked in amazement. It was said that you would not pay very much for treatment. Anyone in Lombardy can use it, Brown murmured quietly, a little shocked. I was proud of his reaction, but I was also a little offended. Lombardy's wealth is evaluated to some extent, but he has such a shocked face. I shrugged and looked around, knowing very well that Brown had no intention of disregarding Lombardy. Then, before I knew it, I could feel a lot of eyes focused on me, a gaze that could possibly pierce right through me. Do you think I can see you squirming at me when I'm far away? As I grumbled, Miguel Ivan, who looked at the seat of the nobles, made a bitter smile. They must be paying close attention to know what the matriarch of Lombardy is like. Well, it wasn't that I didn't understand the reaction of the aristocrats. It was me who became a hot topic every day from the time I became the successor for the first time until it was revealed that I was the real owner of the Pellet Corporation. However, the first thing that started after I took over the Lombardy was far beyond people's expectations. It is a hospital that looks like it is going to cost an astronomical money. It would be a surprise to the nobles who don't know how much Lombardy's fortune really is. I'm sure that's not the only reason. Avinox, who was listening to the conversation between me and Migante Ivan, snapped. It may be because of their fear of the second prince, who will soon become the crown prince. Other householders were looking at him in amazement at the straightforward words, but Avinox seemed not aware of that. From the forgotten prince until this day, he brought down the powerful Anjanas and the empress. No wonder they feel scared. The patriarch of Brown tried to stop Avinox, but I stopped the patriarch from the sidelines. I meant to let them talk. In the situation where the emperor is not getting up from the bed, who can stand against your highness the prince now? From the moment he was appointed as the crown prince, he will hold the unprecedented imperial power in one hand. Ah, he noticed it quickly. Avinox's face turned red when he belatedly noticed that other states were staring at him. I'm sorry, I think I've gone too far again. It's just that Eastern culture is different. I owe you an apology. He didn't say anything wrong. The nobles were afraid of Perez, and they are right to be scared. Many of the families gathered were moved with Anjanas. Fortunately, we have avoided headwinds, but it will not be strange when imperial soldiers come in. Originally, the emperor who came to the throne is supposed to set an example to solidify his authority. As Jovanes was dying, it would only give Perez the imperial power as crown prince. With a consoling heart, I patted Avinox's depressed shoulder. Your Highness, the second prince is coming in. At that time, the door of the conference room opened with the loud voice of the attendant, and Perez, accompanied by imperial knights, walked in. The conference room, which was noisy like a banquet hall, quickly became quiet and cramped. It wasn't simple because of the courtesy of Perez, who would soon become the crown prince. It was because the pressure that seemed to weigh heavily on their whole body spread in the conference room like thick fog, causing people to crumble. The patriarch of Brown coughed a little from the side. The patriarch of Susu also looked at Perez. It was because a strong sense of pressure was flowing out from there. It was a perfect head start where hundreds of nobles who gathered in one place were captured in an instant. Perez, who sat down, looked at the nobles with his red eyes without saying anything. Every time that gaze touched someone, quite a few nobles were seen wince their shoulders. Now it was my turn to step up. I slowly got up from my seat. Then I felt Perez and the eyes of the nobles concentrate on me. It was the authority and the duty of the Patriarch of Lombardy, the central representative, to lead the signing ceremony. Let's proceed without delay. Then the emperor's aides began to move busily. The emperor's appointment letter, which had been rolled up, was spread out in a large marble plate and nailed it in. Then he carefully placed it on the round table. Upon completion of the signatures and seals of the owners, the appointment will be kept securely in the depths of the imperial palace with thick glass atop it. First of all, the Patriarch of Brown moved. With a fearful hand, he picks up his quill, signs his name, and presses the seal of the family he brought. Next was Ivan from the north, Luman from the east, and Sushu from the south. In the conference room, where the silence had fallen, the sound of the householders moving their flag pens rang loudly. Lord Lombardi, Patriarch Susu, who last took the seal, moved away from me. I stood in front of a marble plate with a heavy flag pen handed to me by my attendant. The second prince, I order Perez Brevacho Dorelli as crown prince. At the top of the letter of appointment, there was only a simple phrase written by the emperor, and beneath it were four signatures and seals already in place. Still holding a quill in one hand, I looked straight up and looked at Perez. He and I stared at each other for a few seconds, silently. Perez was expressionless. He seemed indifferent to the extent that he doesn't look like the person who would soon be the crown prince of the empire, as if it were someone else's business. He's not honest. No matter how much Perez hid, at this moment his heart couldn't really be calm. It would be more rewarding if you show off at least a little joy. At that moment, Perez's eyes narrowed slightly, only enough for me to notice in this vast space. That only lasted for a moment. I lifted the quill with a smile on my face. The matriarch of Lombardy, Florentia Lombardi. After a short signature, I took the ring off my finger. Excuse me for a moment. The attendant waiting next to me put ink on the ring, and then I picked it up and pressed it right behind my signature. It was the moment when Lombardi's World Tree took root and the appointment was finally completed. And it was the moment when Perez was finally reborn as the crown prince. All the nobles watching the signing ceremony held their breath. Gulp. Someone couldn't overcome the tension and swallowed loudly. After Lombardi's head had signed, the attendants pressed the glass to cover the appointment, making it like a frame, and quickly carried it out of the conference room. Some of the imperial knights followed suit. It was to keep the appointment letter in case of any accident. The sound of the door closing was heard, and the conference room was again surrounded by silence. Paris rose from his seat and stood on the platform. On the purple cushion, the crown of the crown prince was waiting quietly for its master, shining with jewels. It was about that time that the nobles' agitation began. What's going to happen? Someone murmured. However, it was a question that all of the nobles gathered here came to mind. When the appointment of the crown prince ended smoothly, it was the emperor's job to award the crown prince. When the crown prince knelt in front of the emperor, the formal order was to place his crown over his head and to raise up his successor who was on his knees. If the emperor couldn't do it, it is passed on to the empress. He was a prince when he kneeled down and stood as a crown prince, when he stood up with the help of an imperial adult. However, there was no emperor or empress now. Oh, everyone was surprised by Paris' actions that followed. Paris didn't wait for someone to put the crown over his head. He reached out and grabbed the crown of the crown prince, and without hesitation, he lifted it up and put it on his head. That's how he became the crown prince himself. Once again, the conference room fell into astonishment and silence. From the prince abandoned in the separate palace because no one was looking for him, to the crown prince with a powerful imperial authority. It was a moment symbolizing his desperate journey. I'm literally tearing up when I was first translating this, and it's effing hard to edit while crying, Elmao. Anyways, Florentia did it, and Perez is almost there. Just a little more. Congratulations, Your Highness the Crown Prince Perez. I hope you enjoy the Sunday update, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. End of chapter 252. Chapter 253. And this chapter is dedicated to Gyun Junwon. Thank you for trying to help me. Happy reading. Paris closed his eyes. Above his head, he felt the heavy weight of the ground, ornately adorned with gold and precious stones. Paris Brivacho Dorelli, Crown Prince of the Lambru Empire. He also reflected on his achievements as if savoring it. And as he slowly opened his eyes, he saw hundreds of nobles facing him. They seemed surprised. In the end, it seemed quite shocking that he was ascended to the position of the Crown Prince, and some of them closed their eyes tightly. Yeah, you wouldn't have known. No one would have expected such a future when he existed, and the only illegitimate child of the emperor who was born from the body of a maid became known to them for the first time. They would have thought that the future of the illegitimate child will only be until he dies at the hands of the empress before he reaches adulthood, or when he dies at the hand of Astana, who became the crown prince after being lucky enough to live a little longer. Until I get here. Perez opened his mouth in a low voice. It was a voice that gave listeners goosebumps on their arms. The nobles looked at Perez somewhere with a desperate eyes. So many things have happened. The crown prince's red eyes found those who once spoke up with Angenas one by one. He hadn't even ascended to the throne yet, but he was a little arrogant with the attitude he showed at the crown prince appointment ceremony. No one dared to oppose him. Now that neither the empress and the emperor are not in place, the new crown prince was already the lord of the empire, Perez said as if proclaiming. However, in the new era to come, the mistakes of the past should not leave a stain on them. So I'm here today to sort everything out. Finally, the time has come. Who will be the victim of the example? It was when all the nobles gathered here couldn't even breathe. Bring it. Perez beckoned to the servants waiting at the door. What's that? The attendants were holding a total of 4 sheets of paper. Just a moment ago, like the appointment letter of the crown prince did, each piece is enclosed in a straight frame. Astana Nerempi Dorelli and even Patriarch Mayors and his descendants. Perez said, pointing to the frames in one by one, a memorandum of their abdication of the throne, renunciation of the title of succession to the throne. It was a promise not to succeed to the throne no matter what happened in the future. It was to surrender and dedicate practically everything as an imperial family, giving up the greatest rights given by the lineage. At some point, the nobles were appalled. There was no time to feel the relief that they were not the target of cleaning up. It has been repeated numerous times throughout history that the new throne or the winner of the crown arranges other successors to the throne. But the progress was usually messy and ugly. Many died, and in the process, there were many cases of losing the trust of the imperialists and nobles. It was also the first gateway for Yunwon to jump into the politics, tangled like a spider web and defile his body. The aristocrats were in their doldrums, as if to looking at everyone's eyes. The abdication documents of the heir to the throne shone brightly beyond the gold plate painted frame. The crown prince won and made them surrender their rights without shedding a drop of blood. It was a perfect control. Now the only lineage that will continue the throne to the empire will begin with the crown prince in the future. I think we're ready to start anew. Varus spoke with satisfaction, then pulled another document out of his arms. I will convey to you the maintenance of his majesty. It was a perfectly clerical attitude, but the nobles who accepted it were not. What do you mean maintenance? I didn't expect the sickness to be this severe. Giving down maintenance meant that the emperor's life was running out. The nobles listened to the crown prince in deeper voice. I, Jovanes, emperor of the Lumbru Empire, amends the following with the imperial decree. First, maintain the right to inherit the emperor's family and inheritance. Second, the nobles doubted their ears as they heard the content of the following maintenance. Maintenance was the most powerful weapon the emperor had, because it was Jovanes who was usually greedy. The nobles prepared their hearts and minds. It was because each family had no choice but to follow the most splendid funeral in history, even though they were told to spit out 1,000 golds for each family right now. However, the empress the contents of the maintenance were to maintain the independent authority of the empress, unlike before. There was nothing that Jovanes himself could benefit from. All of it was maintenance for the crown prince, his successor. I can't believe he was doing whatever he pleases. How the hell did he force to do it? The nobles whispered in very small voices. Jovanes couldn't have left that kind of maintenance on his own. The crown prince must have made his majesty left with no choice. Who the hell is he doing that for? One by one, large question marks popped into the heads of the nobles, and at some point they realized it. From a moment ago, the crown prince's gaze remained on the same person as if he was so drawn to her. No way. The Lombardi? But she seems to not feel those gazes. The matriarch of Lombardy sat still in a very casual appearance without agitation. Thanks to this, the confusion of the nobles aggravated, and eventually the quiet conference room began to fluctuate. In the slightest noise, the crown prince said, "Finally, I have one announcement to make." It was clear that the crown prince made up his mind to put everything together perfectly today. The aristocrats were already detonating their third consecutive bomb. I, Crown Prince Perez Brevaccio Dorelli, declare the validity of my engagement with the matriarch of Lombardy, Florentia Lombardi. As a result, some of the nobles even puffed open their mouths as if they were going to object right away. But that was all. To keep their head on their neck, they had to keep their mouth shut. Indeed, the announcement of the engagement was as perfect as everything the Crown Prince has ever done. There was no place to dig in. He brought down his arch-rival Angenas and the Empress, and organized other successors to the throne, leaving no room for the aristocrats to think rudely. In addition, he twisted the arm of the dying emperor to invent a law to protect the rights of the next great empress. The nobles felt completely haunted without even realizing it, and became stupid animals trapped in capture frames. This is to keep the promise between the imperial family and Lombardy. However, the crown prince threatened in a low voice, apparently not enough. I will not marry any other woman other than Florentia Lombardi. With that, they also learned that the word I will not marry implies that I will not see a successor. It is not the emperor's immediate resurrection, but the crown prince's words who will not accept any successor, because he doesn't acknowledge any other empress. So this is nothing short of a half-truth. The nobles thought of the same time. Those who oppose the marriage between me and the Matriarch of Lombardy are against the maintenance of His Majesty the Emperor, and will be charged with the sin of disobedience to the Emperor. No, it was a complete threat. It was as if he was previewing the prince's move to start solo without a hitch. It was then, Your Royal Highness. A voice that was neither too loud nor too high rang quietly in the conference room. The nobility is one of the foundations of the empire. It is also the crown prince's important duty to govern and persuade the nobility. While the crown prince is threatening to send hundreds of nobles in the conference room and behead them for disobedience, who is the one speaking right against the crown prince? The matriarch of Lombardy stood up from her seat at the eyes of those looking for the source of her voice. It's difficult if you just give the umpire to accept and follow it unconditionally. This time, hundreds of eyes were turned to the Crown Prince. It was because they wondered how the Crown Prince would be angry with Matriarch Lombardi, who responded head on to his authority, even though he was a fiancé. But they were once again surprised. I must have been excited for a moment. It was because the Crown Prince, who had been devoting himself to the nobles with his fierce eyes a little while ago, softened at once. Is that all? I apologize. Oh, no, no, apologize. You don't even have to, Crown Prince. When Perez apologized, raising his head slightly, the nobles shook their hands, not knowing what to do, and his eyes, which had settled down a little while ago, began to sparkle toward Florentia. I think I need to explain a little bit more. When Florentia looked at everyone and said so, the nobles raised their ears. I'm not saying I'm going to get married right away. I'm thinking of having a 2-year engagement. Why 2 years, Lord Lombardi? Florentia replied with a smile on someone's question. I have no intention of doing anything half-heartedly between the imperial family and Lombardy, so I want to have someone on each side to help me with my work. Word by word, clear and soft speech without hesitation had the power to arouse faith in the listener. In a different sense from the Crown Prince, the tone was rather pleasant to hear. and it's about 2 years up before my cousin who will help me with that graduates from the academy. So it will be around that time that all preparations for Lombardy are complete for me to take over the authority of the imperial family. It's true. Certainly, Lombardy also needs time. The nobles nodded and understood. And your royal highness and my successors will not only inherit the authority of the imperial family, there's also something that they will inherit from me. Florentia Lombardi. At the words of Florentia, the faces of the nobles were wide open. It was because one person inherited the imperial family and everything in Lombardy, saying that the worst that the nobles feared would not happen. What's more, Florentia Lombardi has a Gallihan clothing business that takes Cheshire oil and the imperial cash. Gulp. Those who recalled how great the power of Florentia Lombardi swallowed. There's not just a bad thing to look at, there's definitely a good side to it. As if ventilating the turbid air, she said with a smile. For example, the hospital we are building in Lombardy. When the hospital, which is the talk of the town, was mentioned, the ears of the aristocrats were lifted once again. As we have decided not to break up and remain engaged, we intend to operate not only for Lombardy citizens, but for the entire empire. Of course, everyone here can use it. Oh, what a pleasure. There is no family who's fast and so as sensitive to their own gain or loss as nobles. In other words, it was easy to handle. Florentia added with a smile on her face. I also plan to further expand the Lombardi Scholarship Foundation. It is true that until now, the focus has been on the art side. At least in the future, smart and talented people will not be prevented from going to the academy for financial reasons. If there is someone like that around you, you can bring them in front of me. Haha, as expected of Lombardi, you have big words. The aristocrats burst into laughter at the rich words of Florentia. Florentia also laughed with them. And through a strange crack in the laughter, someone murmured, no matter how wealthy Lombardi is, can you afford all that money? It was also at that moment that the laughter wiped out from the face of Florentia. Who is it? She said coldly as she glanced over the nobles. I just said that. No wonder the frightened party didn't come forward. A little while ago, the eyes were so cold that she seemed to be the same person as him, enough to make the aristocrats avoid eye contact even though they had no sins committed. The him here is Perez. When no one had come out, the matriarch of Lombardy told everyone. Don't ever doubt Lombardi's abilities again. It was a short but a bloody warning. She overpowered the crown prince, who was sowing fearful energy with a single word, and did good deeds that could benefit the entire empire, and now she even overpowered hundreds of nobles at once. At the same time, the nobles glanced at the face of the person sitting next to them and thought, perhaps they should be more afraid of Lombardy than the crown prince. They nodded implicitly in agreement, even though there was no sound spoken. And the two of them are so badass. I love them. End of chapter 253. Chapter 254. AN. The whole chapter Florentia's point of view. Happy reading. Sigh. The tension that had accumulated so far broke out with a big sigh from my mouth. Sitting on the fluffy sofa. After the Crown Prince appointment ceremony, me and Perez were on our way back to Poirac Palace. Perez, who sits across from me, has long since thrown the crown on his head off a long time ago. Now his button, which was filled to the bottom of the neck, was now being loosened with a rough hand. The appearance of me sitting deep in the chair was far from dignity or formality. At least in this space where the two of us are together, both I and Perez can breathe comfortably. However, my heart is still not very comfortable. Crazy. I did it. I did it. I muttered, covering my face with both hands. It was already decided that we'll announce our relationship at the Crown Prince appointment ceremony. The feeling of lethargy that came after the real work made my body heavy like wet cotton. Huh. Once again, I could see Perez's face through the gap of my hand, sighing. Unlike me, who is exhausted, he has a very nonchalant face, holding a glass of water to his mouth. Perez, my voice sounds a little crooked. Why are you so fine? It's roughly similar to why do you look like that? I know it's not the right thing to say half arguably all of a sudden. It's also true that he looks so normal. Perez, who was about to drink water, stops acting and looks at me. I'm fine? Perez tilted his head slightly sideways and asked me back. Then he spoke slowly. I'm pretty sad right now. Are you sad? My heart sank and it seemed to sink. A while ago, he gathered hundreds of nobles and announced that he would marry me with all sorts of threats. Why are you sad now? Perez, you. I'm so overwhelmed that I can't even speak properly. How can you say that? Doesn't it mean you're regretting it? I heard that there is something called marriage blues before entering the wedding hall. Still, I can't believe you regret it so quickly. My head was tangled like a bundle of wool from a cut. The sound of Paris putting the glass down on the table rang a little louder, and he came dawdling over to me. I think I can hear footsteps loudly today. Standing in front of me, sitting on a single sofa, Paris held both armrests with his hands and slowly leaned towards me. Tia, would it be my illusion if I felt that there was some kind of deep sigh mixed with that low voice? What is it? Are you going to say you regret it? As Paris approached, I struggled to pretend to be unaware of my beating heart and stick to my angry expression. Paris, who was looking into my face, said briefly, 2 years. 2 years? I blinked because I couldn't understand the word that suddenly popped out. Then Paris' red eyes looked straight at me and spoke in a lower voice. I have to wait 2 more years. Are you talking about the duration of the engagement period? Perez didn't answer, but his eyes on me were answering instead. I can't help it. I spoke comfortably to Perez. When Granny graduates from the academy and returns, I'll trust my family's work on him. That way, we can do the imperial work and Lombardy's work well. I know, Perez answered right away. And even among aristocrats, it is common to have a period of engagement to some extent. But Perez isn't listening to any of my explanations. His eyes were busy tracing my face. 2 years. Perez once again lamented. His red eyes became even more red, as if there was an ember. I have to stop it here. Some kind of alarm system which was created by several experiences was ringing in my head. Perez, huh? You don't have a good look in your eyes. When Perez says, "Is that so?" I felt awkward and thought I'd back off. But Tia, he even smiled lightly. Perez slowly strokes my arm with his right hand. The destination is my left hand holding the armrest of the chair. Secretly, the palm of my hand squeezed again. I said, narrowing my eyes, "A wolf." Then he kissed the back of my hand and stretched out the corners of his mouth. Thank you. My heart is racing. And my heart is racing. In the end, my heart beat loudly. Perez's body temperature, which I could feel up close, seemed to hold me tight. I couldn't stand it, and so I jumped up from my seat and walked to the window. When the minute cold breeze felt through the closed window touched my burning face, the heat seemed to go away for a little. For now, let Caitlin prepare for the Crown Prince appointment celebration a week later. After taking a few deep breaths, a pretty sound voice came out. I turned around, satisfied with that. I'm also busy with Lombardi's work for the time being, so I can't even care about the banquet. Perez was right behind me all of a sudden. You. I hesitated and took a half step back, but my back only hit the chin of the window. Tia, Perez wrapped his arms around my waist, calling my name in a low voice. How did you know I'm weak with that voice? Perez, who wrapped his arms around my waist slowly, also pulled me slowly with a firm hand. Slouchy long eyelashes and loose lips. I was pretending to be calm, but I could read it. The longing for me contained in the red eyes and the indescribable nervousness that cannot be hidden. Oh, really? Eventually, I spit out words of surrender and pulled Perez around his neck. Through the body in contact, the sound of his low laugh was transmitted to me. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. A few days later, how the hell did my grandfather do this? The householder's work was hectic. Of course, my grandfather must have had the weapons of years of experience, something that I do not have now. Perhaps this huge workload was a problem for my grandfather, who passed me the household post and entered his full-fledged retirement life to get better day by day. But I'm glad that everyone is doing well. I mumbled like that and piled up the documents I had signed for the day on one side of the desk. Indeed, as far as I'm concerned, the members of Lombardy were doing their best in their place. It's been years since I've had such a solid family. Viz in my previous life may have been a great person in his own way. Knock knock. Then there was a low knock. Lord, it's John. Come in. It was John the butler and Bate who came in after opening the door. Not long ago, Bate successfully launched a restaurant and begun to make a name for himself as a well-rounded catering entrepreneur. But it's just the outer packaging. Nowadays, Bate was cheering that more high-end information was pouring in as he opened a restaurant rather than money. What brings you here? At my question, Bate took a glance at John and said politely, bobbing his head, Last time we delivered a steak meal from our restaurant with a special reservation to the mansion's kitchen. In a little while, you will be able to eat the food on a warm plate. I have never made such a reservation. If so, it means that there is news that needs to be delivered urgently enough to disguise the delivery route. I'm just a little hungry. Will you bring me some food, John? I sent John out of the office. As the door closed and John's footsteps faded away, Bate threw off his calm face and said, Remember when I told you a while ago that I found the man who murdered the Crown Princess Nanny? I nodded. Upon His Majesty's order, he left young Perez alone in his villa and drugged his nanny. And he was found off the southwestern river. But he said something strange. Strange? Bates stepped closer to the office desk and lowered his voice. It wasn't the Empress who killed the Crown Prince's mother. It's not Lavini. I shook my head. No one has a motive to kill Perez's mother unless it's Rabini. She was a maid with a quiet personality from a commoner. That's what the Crown Prince's nanny said, in tears before she died. Anyway, it was the nanny who served Perez and Perez's mother right next to him. If I heard it directly from his mouth, it was credible. I asked Bate, Who did you say killed her? A.N. Dadun, if it's not Rabini, who do you think killed Perez's mother? The last two chapters will be the last update. I think I can update it on Sunday. Enjoy your day. End of chapter 254. Chapter 255. You're here, Crown Prince. What about your majesty? It's the same today. I think it's gotten worse. The knight guarding the front of the bedroom shook his head. But your majesty will be pleased that your royal highness has come. Your majesty awaits your arrival. I see, Paris answered briefly. However, a little twist in one's mouth was unbearable. The emperor must be waiting for his time to come. There was a rattling noise from the tray of tea in his hand. Open the door. Yes, your grace. The loyal knights quickly opened the door to the emperor's bedroom. Twice a day, Paris' arrival time was fixed, so all the maids had already left. You're late. Jovane said with an intrusive breath. It was always the same thing. Next to the bed were several small pieces of vases that seemed to have been broken by Jovanes without defeating his temper. I will prepare the tea. Paris prepared the tea as usual. In a cup, a little larger than a regular one, a warm tea was put into Jovane's hands. Even with his hands trembling, unable to breathe well, Jovanes quickly accepted the cup. Strangely, when I drink this tea, it's a little easier to breathe. Jovane said so and gulped down the tea. Paris gazed, watched it from a distance. One more drink. Jovane hastily drank tea and emptied the second glass. Yes, that's better, Jovane said, sweeping his chest with a satisfied face. While lying in his bed, he lost weight, and the generous appearance of the past has become unimaginably thin and dry. However, only the unpleasant gaze toward Paris in those eyes was still there. That day after tomorrow is your celebration. That's right. Paris remained motionless on the spot, still with his hands behind his back. Jovens laughed at the sight. Behind the scenes, how bad will it be? The crown prince of the great empire, just like you, has become a man of low blood mixed with it. It was Jovens who coveted the lowly maid and brought a life out of the world. However, there was no such guilt in Jovens' gaze at Perez. I should have saved Astana. I should have done it. That's what Jovens has been saying a lot lately, as if he thought that world would provoke Perez. But Perez always responded with a blank expression, like now. At least, Astana, unlike you, arrogant. Jovane stopped talking. It was because he noticed that his body was strange. Gasp, hook. He ran out of breath twice as much as usual, as if his lungs were completely shrunk. He couldn't breathe. Hyok, come on, doctor, Jovane said, tearing his stuffy chest and throat. The gasping breath didn't even come out properly, but Paris didn't respond. He just looked at Jovane still behind him. Go, don't, stand still. Do something. Eventually, the body of Jovane who was sitting fell back. The teacup that Jovane was holding rolled over a thick rug under the bed. It was then that Paris began to move. Paris reached out and picked up the teacup with a cold face. He quietly laid it down on the side table. You. Jovains pointed a finger at Paris, realizing something. Then he started screaming with all his with all his might. Outside, call, but what came out was only a voice that was less than a yawning sound. Gasp. Jovain's hands and feet began to stiffen. Paris, looking down at the trembling limbs, opened his mouth. Die. Isn't it all going to be comfortable when you die? Jovains distorted his face. Paris laughed at the sight of Jovains, who doesn't know what he meant. You don't seem to remember. I've never forgotten it until now. Well, that's what you said while holding the poison in my mother's hand. Jovain's eyes opened in bewilderment. How? That night, my mother had a fever. I went downstairs and wet the towel. Paris said, recalling that dark night. You were there, but when mother sent dozens of or hundreds of letters like that, even if she screamed for courtship, she couldn't even see the hem of your clothes. Do you know that it's not something I'm proud of? That night, Jovains visited the villa alone with neither an attendant nor an escort. Funny, it was also Paris' first time to see his father. It was the first time I saw a cowardly back through an open door. Drink this and finish it. I will take care of your son and save his life. So die. My position is very uncomfortable because you're not dying. Paris calmly recalled the memory of the day. My mother's hand, who was holding her hem while crying for help, was very compassionate to your majesty. Well, that's at that time. Jovains puffed as if to make some excuse, but he was short of breath, so even that was difficult. He liked it, and Paris even laughed looking at him, and said, Go ahead and die. My position is very uncomfortable because you are not dying. Cough, cough. Eventually, Jovain's eyes began to turn. It smelled bad, whether he had an incontinent or not. But Perez said in Jovain's ears, who was trembling like a seizure, Your Majesty, I will take responsibility. I will leave you in the history books as the worst stupid emperor in the history of the empire, so take it easy. A ravenous sound, like an animal biting a bubble, emanated from the mouth of Jovains, which opened up meaninglessly. It was the sound of a person who had to die a long time ago, saying that he would try to breathe a few more times, so ravenous greed was met. Eventually, Jovain's movement stopped. Paris looked into the eyes of Jovain's, which was wide open. The red bloodshot eyes were filled with resentment for not knowing their sins. But it's also for a while. Paris closed Jovain's eyes with an expressionless face. He also released his hand, which had grasped his neck, as if tearing it, and laid it neatly on both sides. Finally, the mouth that had opened like a devil was also closed by pressing it. Before you knew it, Jovain's looked calm, as if he had fallen asleep. Over the past hour, Jovane was breathless, and the bedroom without a quiet day was finally immersed in perfect silence. Paris turned around, then he opened the bedroom door and said, Your Majesty is dead. While the startled knights hardened it in place, the maid and court lady waiting outside the bedroom jumped inside. Your Majesty, surprised, they immediately checked Jovane's breathing and heartbeat, but it was too late. Gasp, when the emperor died, it was the etiquette that the whole country, as well as those he served by, fell in sorrow. Your Majesty, Soon the knights dropped their heads, but in the meantime, Perez was far away. I have to inform the obituary. It was when he spoke shortly and turned back. Tia, at the end of the corridor, Florentia stood. At that moment, he could tell that she already knows everything. Perez's face hardened, as if he had been caught. He wanted to run away. I was afraid. I was afraid she'll despise me. It's dirty and ugly. She might even curse at me. As she approached one step at a time, his heart beat faster. And when they finally met each other, Perez, she called his name and hugged him tightly. Florentia's warmth smeared on his hardened body. The eyes of the knights and attendants near the bedroom gathered at the two, so that they did not hear it. She pulled Perez's head and whispered in his ear, I'm sorry, Perez. It was a voice full of sadness. I'm sorry I didn't find out in advance that something like that happened to you. Her hands, hugging his waist, swept his back. I'm sorry that you have been hurt alone. Snap. It sounded as if a crack was breaking. A drop of tears fell from his eyes, smearing over her shoulders. Paris curled up his large body. He put his body deeper in her arms and hugged her protectively. Those who watched it were simply thinking, the Crown Prince is saddened by His Majesty's death. Like they are trying to protect each other. Like they were keeping this a secret between them. No one knew the true reason that the lovers who hugged each other tightly were sharing. It was on the day of Javain's Emperor of Lambru died. AN, you did great, Paris. I'm so proud of you. Live a happy life from now on. And here's my promised update. Enjoy the next one too. Wow, what a twist. End of chapter 255.